name is Brian Thamer. I'm the Chair Pro Tem of the Solano County Libertarian Party. I wanted to welcome everyone to we're kind of co-hosting our monthly meeting. See some new faces in the audience, so thank you for coming. We're here at Glimpses Coffee House here in Fairfield, California. I'd like to thank our host, Paul Kent, for hosting this evening with Assemblyman Tim Donnelly. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Paul Kent.
Well, it's rarely you get somebody where you feel really comfortable with, and Kimberly and I went up to see Tim in Sacramento. He's assemblyman in Sacramento, and my first encounter with him, because he's a Republican, I said, well, don't Republicans owe Ron Paul an apology? Because he was treated very badly. Well, apparently, come to find out that Tim's been treated rather badly by the Republican Party too. So we're really pleased tonight that you all came out, and I'd like to welcome Tim Donnelly.
Well, thank you, Paul, and thank you, Brian, and thank all of you for being here. You know, it's a Wednesday night. There's a whole lot of other things you could be doing, but you have decided to come out and see what you can do to fight to restore the freedoms that we've lost. And, you know, it's interesting. Paul was talking about, asking me at that event about the Republican Party. It was very interesting because everywhere I go in the Republican Party, there are people that work harder against me than they would even against a Democrat. And yet they claim the Democrats are their opponents. I would say that the Democrats are their buddies, and after hours, they're basically all the same. Because for the vast majority of elected officials nowadays, there are no longer two parties, but there are two classes. There's the political class, and then there's the rest of us. And I include myself in the rest of us, because I'm just one of us who got in that building. And the word Republican and Democrat, when I go out and talk to people, those might as well be cuss words. Because both parties have left the principles long ago. They have left behind the people. And, you know, to some extent, it's necessary to have one of those letters next to your name to get all the mind-numb zombies that are what the media calls low-information voters, who never bothered to read anything, who never do any research, but will blindly vote a letter. And so that's worked in my favor. I thought, when I was running for office, that I was an independent. That's how I thought of myself. I had left, my heart had left the party because the party had left me. And I found out that if you haven't actually changed your registration, you don't have a choice when you're running for office to change your registration less than a year out. And I started running for office 4 months before the election. And I discovered something that has served me well, which is I went in the beginning to all of those people that I thought were good people in politics, and I asked them for advice. And that's when I learned what politics was all about. And it was very interesting. I called one fellow who I was told would help me. And he asked some really good questions. He said, what in the world are you doing in this race? You don't have any money. You don't have any endorsements. You're not going to be able to buy cable television ads. You're not going to be able to buy radio ads. You're not going to be able to do mail pieces. You're not going to do an absentee ballot chase. You are going to be unable. You're going to have nobody to do independent expenditures on your behalf. And I had to look up the absentee ballot chase because I had no idea what that was. But, you know, I argued back with him and I said, don't you think the issues matter? I mean, don't you think that there's an awful lot of Americans here in California that are frustrated And don't you think that'll play into it? And he said no. So as we were talking, something occurred to me. I figured out that he was working for one of my opponents. And so I said, you know what? I just want to let you know my unofficial polling, since I can't afford to do the kind of polling you guys are paying for, has me beating your guy. As soon as I said that, I found out what he was really passionate about. And he got so fired up and he got so angry and he berated me and just, I literally wanted to wash my hands from the evil that was seeping through the phone. Now this guy's on our side, supposedly. But it was great. Because that hardened my resolve for a fight that everybody said was impossible. They said it's impossible to win a district by walking door to door. You have to raise $50,000. Well, I won by 1 vote per precinct. And what that tells you is it can be done. Now, is it easy? No. It's the hardest work I've ever done in my life. I walked door to door. Our campaign headquarters was In-N-Out Burger. I was eating a cheeseburger, fries, and a milkshake every day, and I got down to my high school weight. My wife fell in love with me all over again on election night. But I'll tell you something. I believe that how you get into office is as important, if not more important, than just winning. Because if you think about it, if a candidate comes to you, and I like the fact you guys videotape your candidates, because then you can hold them accountable. And you're being absolutely consistent with what the founders told us to do. They said the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. And if a candidate comes to you and says all the right things and gets elected and then abandons all of those principles, that's not a victory. Now, a lot of people think it is because they don't think. And they go, well, we got our guy in there. See, I don't care whether they have an R next to their name. If they want to undermine the principles that made this country great, then they become the enemy of freedom. And right now, it is crystal clear. And by the way, we've been advised by our president not to listen to people who are talking about tyrants and tyrannical governments. Wow, that guy, his arrogance knows no bounds. To be lectured. Just think about that for a minute. Because I think that attitude permeates every aspect of our politics. That we are not to question. As if somehow we have a king instead of a president who we elect who is supposed to answer to the people. But see, the problem that we have here in California is everybody's given up. People don't think we can win. People say, well, if you're going to win the governor's race, you've got to have $50 million. Really? I think there's another way you could do it. And I'll tell you something. Somebody asked me a question earlier tonight. Is there any big money behind you? Well, I went and visited with a donor who gave Mitt Romney $80,000. Or gave the party $80,000 and they gave it to him. This guy is a guy that doesn't meet with the Tim Donnellys of the world. And when I sat down with him, he asked me a question right away. He said, I want to know, where do you stand with the Republican establishment? And I said, well, they don't like me. He said, why? I said, because I got here without their permission. He said, okay, what's your plan? I said, my plan is to do the opposite of what they've done. He said, that's great, because all they've done is lose for the last 20 years. And I said, all I've ever done is win. And his next statement was very interesting. He said, "How much can I write my check for?" And I said, "You can write it for $27,200. He said, "Okay. What else can I do?" And I said, "By the way, when you write it for 27.2, put a comma after the 7 before the 2. And he said, "I'm in." And then he said, "What else can I do?" And when he asked me that, it was very, very interesting. Because we were having this conversation, and it really gave me a glimpse into how I am going to win. Because I'm not in this for any other reason. I can affect no change, and I will not be in this race one day longer than I believe I can win. Because that serves nobody's purpose. But as we were talking, he realized that he had seen my name mentioned statewide, because he's nowhere near my district, at least 5 times in the past 2 years. Why is that? Because when I got into office, I didn't sit around and wait for the Republican caucus to tell me how to vote. And by the way, I have the record for the most no votes in the entire building because I actually read the bills. The key to victory is to get your opponent to attack you on the very issues that will connect you to people. When we think about elections, I think too often people say, "Well, he's a Republican," and then as soon as they say that, it's such that brand has been so tarnished that it's a negative. But if you gain a reputation for fighting about something that people care about, now notice I didn't say anything about politics. I just said something that people care about. So when I was sitting there with this gentleman, he realized he had seen me on television initially because I said I would bring the Arizona law to California, and I followed through on that. Now, did it pass? No, it didn't. Did we have a hearing where we vetted out an issue that nobody wants to talk about in a huge way? Absolutely. We talked about sanctuary cities. I brought in people who had been affected by sanctuary cities, whose sons had been murdered by people. And yet, they're running bills to make every single city in California a sanctuary city. So clearly, I was standing on the side of the people. Number 2, I tried to repeal the California DREAM Act, which was passed, which is an unmitigated disaster. It serves as an incentive for more and more people to come here illegally. We all say we don't want more illegal immigration, and yet we keep rewarding it. And you guys know markets work. If you offer something to somebody, they will respond to that incentive. And right now, if you live south of our border and you're watching on television and they say, "Hey, if you go to California, not just America, but California in particular, and they will give you free food, a welfare check, they will give you anything and everything, and by the way, they will pay for your kids' college education," you would be nuts not to come here. And you know, those market forces are not just bringing people here illegally from other countries. They're coming here from other states, which are not as friendly, because I believe, and history bears out this sentiment, that if we align our financial incentives with our real goals, then we will actually have government working for us instead of against us. So right now, 62% of the people are against the California DREAM Act. Most people don't even know it's open-ended. It isn't just for the kids who were brought here illegally, 20 years ago or 25 years ago or 18 years ago or 10 years ago. It's for the kids that are going to come here illegally next year, the year after, 10 years from now, and 100 years from now. And they're going to get free college tuition. I think We ought to acknowledge that we took care of the kids who came here as children now. The California Dream Act exists. We ought to give it a cutoff date. We ought to have an end date for it and say, okay, we're going to take care of the kids who were brought here during this time period and then end it. But you know what? Because it isn't a whole lot of money, I would like to align the interests and the motivations with something we do want, which is we do need more people to come here. But you know who comes here and doesn't get the DREAM Act? People who serve in the armed forces. They're transferred through no fault of their own. They have no control over their destiny. They're set up at a military base. I would like to offer that package, that exact same package with in-state tuition and free college tuition to service members and their families. Because ultimately, they're the kind of people that we want. They're willing to go fight. They're willing to sacrifice. They're willing to defend our freedom. So I would like them to want to stay here in California and become part of a new California, a California that's headed in the right direction. So he realized that he had seen me out there trying to repeal the DREAM Act. I gathered 10,000 volunteers. I raised about 450,000 signatures. And we ultimately were defeated by the clock because we had to contend with Thanksgiving and Christmas. But it really gave me an insight. This is one of those issues. It's a huge crossover issue. It's a little tiny sliver that the media never talks about, but when it comes to illegal immigration and education funding, particularly related to college, you can win over liberal Democrats. 25% of the people that were helping me repeal the DREAM Act were hardcore liberal Democrats. I never forget this one lady. She sent me a note. She said, I'm a lifelong Democrat. I'm a liberal. I'm a feminist. And I'm an atheist. And I am helping Tim Donnelly repeal the DREAM Act, and I am 100% behind you. Now think about that. Because if you want to win a statewide election like a gubernatorial race, it doesn't matter if you just win the Republican Party. If all you can win is the Republican Party, you lost. Because the Republican Party is now so small, it represents roughly 27% of the electorate. You guys know what the fastest growing party in California is, right? It's neither. It's people that designate as declined to state. And a lot of them probably feel the way a lot of us feel, that we just want the government out of our lives. We're sick and tired of having government dictate every single solitary decision. And by the way, if you feel that way, I have some bad news for you. I'm on the Appropriations Committee. We hear every single bill that comes through that building before it reaches the floor. They brought a bill today to ban the sale of certain food items in vending machines that are controlled by the state. So in a state building, any vending machine in there where the state has any kind of control over it will no longer have what they classify as junk food. And that might not seem like the hill to die on, but as I listened to the conversation, I was looking down at my notes and I was listening to them. And let me tell you what I heard. I heard the government knows best. I heard because the government is now involved in healthcare, they want to make the decisions for you. I don't know about you, it isn't about junk food, because if I eat that, I got to answer to my wife. Okay, believe me, the market forces their work real well. So, but it's about whether you get to make that decision. You know, how many of you here saw the story the other day about baby Sammy? Saw the baby ripped out of the arms of a loving mother by a cold, armed government. Forget about police officers. This was a government agency that is able to command the police to coerce a decision. Now, what was the woman's crime? Because I wanted to know.
She wanted a second opinion.
She wanted a second opinion on her son's health care. When I heard about this story, it was Saturday morning. I was getting ready to catch a flight. I immediately called CPS and I called the hospital. Nobody called me back. Monday morning, I called again. And I also called some of my friends. Some of my friends are Hollywood actors. I called Rob Schneider and some other people. And we started putting pressure on them. And I got through. And I talked to the spokespeople. And I asked the first question that is on the minds of everybody when they hear CPS is involved, right? Because you know it's guilty until proven innocent. And I said, are these parents suspected of any negligence or abuse? Both of them said absolutely not. I said, then what the hell are you doing? What the hell is the government doing in control of this child? By what authority? So I wrote a letter. And I sent it off to the head of the Department of Health and Human Services, who is in charge of Child Protective Services, which is an agency that is run out of the county of Sacramento. You know what they told me? We don't answer to assemblymen. Now, I represent 500,000 people. We don't answer to you. If you don't have chills right now, let me just walk you through the history. This child is 5 months old. He needs heart surgery. That is a traumatic thing for those parents. The mother told me she doesn't want him to have heart surgery until she feels that he's strong enough to survive it. And so on this particular day, he got a temperature, and they were worried because he's so frail. So they brought him in the emergency room at 2 o'clock in the morning. The nurse begins administering antibiotics, but the doctor said, no, you're not supposed to give him antibiotics. She begins losing confidence in the healthcare provider. And by the way, this is a free country, right? If you don't like the service, you can leave. At least that's what I thought. She wasn't happy. They said, your son needs immediate open heart surgery. She said, hey, I'm not comfortable. And the doctor even told her, hey, you know what, this is just like putting on my shoes in the morning. She said, you know what, as soon as he said that, I felt like that doctor was going to walk out of that room and tell me, we're sorry, your son didn't make it. So she grabbed her son and she left that hospital. She did not sign the discharge papers. That's the only thing that she did wrong. Now that's completely understandable under the circumstances. She didn't run off to a bar. She didn't go home and do drugs and sit there all passed out on the couch. She took her child to another hospital. She got a second opinion. The police, escorted by CPS, came to the second hospital. At the second hospital, they saw the doctor discharge the child to the care of the mother, and they said fine, and they went home. The next day, there's a knock at the door. There's 4 police officers and a CPS social worker standing at the door of this couple's home. The wife is home alone. The husband's off working. She calls him, and meanwhile, she sets up a video camera. And by the way, this couple they're immigrants from Russia. And see, we've all heard the stories. In Russia, a knock on the door often meant that people disappeared and were never seen or heard of again. So this woman was very smart. She took a video camera like this one on the tripod here, and she turned it toward the door. Very good idea. And then she asked questions. I was so impressed at how calm she was. Because you know what she really did? You know what she modeled for us? She modeled for us how we should treat our government, which is incredibly skeptical. I don't trust you. She said, do you have a warrant? They said yes. They lied. She said, can I see the warrant? They said no. She said, just show it to me through the window or hand it through the mailbox. They said no. You have to open the door, then we'll show it. By this time, her husband arrives home. They grab him, throw him up against the wall, grab the keys to his apartment out of his pocket. And by the way, they do not have a warrant. They open the door. They barge in, hands on their guns. Now, mind you, this is a frail, petite woman with a child. So I ask the question again, what the hell are they doing? And why do we tolerate it? And how do we stop it? So she stands there very calmly. She says, may I see the warrant? She thinks the paper they have is a warrant, but it really isn't. It's an order from CPS. CPS doesn't have to go. If they don't want to, they don't have to go to a judge. So you get no due process. There's no second set of eyes that looked at this. That's the separation of powers. There is none in this agency. And so she's standing there at her front door, surrounded by police officers, and they say, you're delaying, you're resisting. If you don't... And finally they just said, you know what? She said, well, can I ask a question? Oh, you want me to go to the hospital? Oh, okay. She said, I'm willing to go to the hospital. We just came back from the hospital. They wouldn't even let her talk. They kept cutting her off time and time and time again. And then they told her, you just need to let go of the baby, because if you resist, we are just going to grab him out of your arms. And they took her baby. And then she said, okay, where are you taking him? Very calmly. And then the social worker said, we can't tell you that. She said, why? She said, because you're acting irrationally. The only irrational players in this entire Kafkaesque scene were the government officials that should have the respect for the Constitution. They should understand that she has an absolute right to be free from an unlawful search and seizure, that they have no right to penetrate that door without a warrant or her permission. But they don't. And you know what happens? You know why nobody ever goes after them? Because nobody ever set up a video camera like that. And what they do is they just tell you, hey, if you don't cooperate, we're taking your kid. Now, why am I giving you the long version of the story? Because this story right here is part of how I intend to win this election. Because all I did was the right thing. I didn't do it for any other reason than it was the right thing. It's not even in my district. But I wrote a letter, and then I just stuck the letter up. I made a little JPEG out of it. You know, I figured out how to do that. My kid showed me. And I stuck it on Facebook. And then I went to dinner with some realtors, and I worked the whole room and was building support all over the state. And I get a text from one of my staffers, and they said, did you realize that in the last 2 hours there's 27,000 people have seen your post? 24 hours later, it was over 54,000. Then it went viral after that. Then it got picked up by news stations. Fox News interviewed me, and the interviewer was phenomenal, Megyn Kelly. And she just literally became that mama bear, grizzly bear, and said what everyone else is thinking.
She's pregnant too, right now.
Well, I didn't know that, but boy, was she sure put it out there. But see, the difference between politics as usual and doing the right thing. I had all the politicians come up to me on Monday. Oh, wow, you got your name in the... Well, they're trying to get their names in the paper because then people will see my name and I'll get the name recognition. No, you know what? I have this simple theory. Do the right thing. Make sure the people know you did it, and you can win. And I believe that. It may sound really ridiculously simple, but I could go somewhere and maybe I could channel Ronald Reagan. You know, maybe just for a moment I could become that articulate and brilliant and just deliver the perfect 15-minute speech on how the government has encroached on every aspect of your life, whether you realize it or not, and how they're controlling things that they have no business even being involved in. But you know what? Most people never pay attention to it, and most people would never see that speech. And they certainly wouldn't sit there for 15 minutes in our 15-second world, would they? But if you touch somebody's heart, and they see that you're their champion, they'll go to the ends of the earth for you. And to me, it may sound unconventional. There won't be a ton of money, but I'll find the guys who will write the $27,000 checks because they're tired of losing. Because when I talk to them, I say, well, how's that working for you? How was that last campaign? Who was the candidate again for the 2010 election? I forget her name. I think it was something like Meg. You know why she lost? Well, yeah, she had too much money. I don't have that problem. She never connected with us. She didn't connect with the conservative base, let alone the people in the middle. What is the theory today? You know what the theory today in the Republican Party is? All that matters is the color of your skin. And that's their theory. And I don't know about you, but that offends me so deeply. That runs against every fiber of my being. Because I always love the idea of how Martin Luther King elevated the whole conversation and said it's not about the color of your skin, but the content of your character. Well, how about the content of your campaign? Because freedom doesn't know a color. Freedom has a banner. It's red, white, and blue. People have died for that banner. I consider it the duty of every elected official in the state and at the federal level to defend that same freedom here with that same passion as those people who climbed over each other's bodies on the beaches of Normandy. And if they're not doing that, if they're not speaking out against this, if they're not voting no when the lobbyist is sitting right there, they know that lobbyist will write them a check. But it's just another law we don't need. It's another restriction. It's another power grab of the government. And so, part of my plan is very simple. I want to get the media to attack me on the issues that I have taken strong stances on. They are going to attack me relentlessly on illegal immigration. And that is a huge issue. It is like an iceberg. All you see at the top is what's sticking out of the water. That issue affects every aspect of our lives. It is a huge fiscal issue. It's an education issue. It's a national security issue. It covers so many different aspects. It's labor. It's code enforcement. It's compliance. It's many, many, many multifaceted. But the bottom line is 70% of Californians at a minimum are really upset about it. 62% are willing to say it to a pollster. And that was a liberal poll. So I would take that 62% number and ratchet it up close to 70. So when they attack me on that, what are they really doing? I mean, all I'm doing is turning around the game on them, right? Because right now, the Democrat National Committee, otherwise known as ABC, NBC, CBS, when they're running a commercial for a Democrat candidate like Barack Obama or Jerry Brown, disguised as a newscast, why can't I do that? Why can't I have a guerrilla campaign where I attack, I stand, I can articulate those principles very well. And if I ever make it into the debate, which I believe I will, then I use the debate to answer the questions that are on the minds of people that are raised, in many cases, by the attacks. But if the media attacks me enough, I could get $10 million worth of free media in 3 months. And I'm not exaggerating. Now, what is the other big issue of the day? Because there's going to be 3 really big issues in this campaign, in my opinion. The absolute top #1 issue is going to be taxes. And when liberals like Rob Schneider are coming to people like me and saying, I want to help you win, and I'm a liberal left-wing Democrat who doesn't agree with you on anything except taxes. So we have very interesting conversations. When he's talking about things I don't agree on, I eat. Keeps my mouth shut. And then vice versa. But the bottom line is, when the pendulum has swung so far to the wrong side that you have people who shouldn't be on your side getting on your side, if you're able to mobilize that, well, that will help me raise money. Right there. So I believe Prop 30 ultimately, even though it has collected more revenues this year, we will see a dramatic drop-off in the tax revenue collection. Because what they got was what they could steal out of your pocket. They came up behind every business owner and they picked their pockets. They made that tax retroactive. And a lot of those business owners are very angry. And there's a governor in another state who's been calling them on the phone and sending them this beautiful little walnut wooden boxes with a cell phone inside that has one number pre-programmed. And they're directly talking to Governor Rick Perry. And I've talked to a number of them that have been recruited, and some of them are moving. Well, one of these guys I was talking to pays $500,000 in state income tax. That means he's making $5 million a year. If that guy leaves, it's not just the $500,000, it's the 500 employees he has. Now they're out of work. So how big is the hole going to be in our budget? And once, I don't know how to measure that. But I believe that will be the impact, because that's historically what has always happened when you raise tax rates, revenues drop off over time. The retroactivity is the only reason they spiked. So what are they going to come after next? They're going to come after Prop 13. And they're going to try to do what's called a split roll. When they do the split roll on Prop 13, meaning you split off the business owners from the residential property owners. And Prop 13 was designed to protect property taxes from going up too fast every year. Well, if you go after the apartment buildings and you go after an ordinary business, most businesses have a triple net lease, small businesses. So now you're going to put even more businesses out of business. You're going to have apartment owners walking away from their properties, or they're going to pass that on to the renter. Well, the last time when Prop 13 was on the ballot, 83% of the people showed up to vote. And you had the renters voting alongside the property owners. That is not a complex issue. So once again, you have an issue that will unite people, and it does it in large enough numbers that you could win the election if you know how to articulate it, and if you know how to defend it, and you know how to explain it. The other issue is going to be guns. And it really doesn't matter what you think about guns. It matters whether you value freedom, because that's what's at stake. And on that issue, the media will relentlessly attack me and say, this is the assemblyman that took a loaded 45 onto an airplane. You know, and I'll say, well, that's actually not accurate. I took a loaded 45 through TSA because I forgot it was in my bag. And that's it. And I told the truth about it. I didn't prevaricate. I didn't hire a lawyer and have a spokesman speak for me. I went out to the people and I answered the questions. And yes, at the time I was getting death threats. That's just a fact. My family was assaulted by an individual that, if he wasn't stopped, had the potential to kill us. He was almost as big as the gentleman who just walked in with the shaved head, and I wouldn't mess with him. But you know what? On the green side of things, I am an environmentalist, because I do carry hollow points, because I figure whatever I shoot, I don't want it to get out there in the fish and wildlife and hurt anything. But the truth is that is a huge crossover issue. We elected Governor Duke Majan on the back, I believe it was Prop 15, that was an attempt to take away some of our Second Amendment rights. And so you had Republicans, Democrats, and Independents who came together to defend the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment has never been under the attack that it is under today in California. And when I mean today, I'm not talking about this week, this month, this era. I'm talking about literally today, Wednesday, May 8th. There is a bill that is going through right now. It is AB 711. They call it the lead ammo ban. It ain't a lead ammo ban. These people are diabolically smart. When they have the advantage, you know what they do? They press it. And they press it, and they press it. They don't back off and go, hey, let's take it easy. No, they press it. This ban is very simple. As soon as you ban lead in bullets, you have to go to another metal. Well, almost every other metal that you use is considered to be armor piercing. So when you shoot, or when you want to buy an armor piercing round, you can't, not for any handguns. So at first you say, oh, okay, well, my rifle is okay, right? I got a 30-06 or a 308 or what have you, or a 50 cal, right? Except that there is a pistol made for almost every rifle round, or we're getting there. So that's where it gets a little scary. So you have a federal armor-piercing ammo ban that essentially could take away your right to ever shoot legally your rifle. So you can forget about hunting. It isn't about saving the environment. It is about disarming you. And what is the purpose of disarming you? We've seen this play out in history over and over and over again. It's about control. It's not about gun control. It's about control. And that right there is something that touches the heart of every person, because people are starting to see it. And I happen to run a bill called AB 351 that makes it illegal for any California law enforcement agency to cooperate with federal authorities in indefinitely detaining any human being on California soil. See, they want to do this under the name of terrorism. Whew. As soon as we say terrorism, then all of a sudden everybody freezes in their tracks and they stop thinking. And they grant all these powers to the government. All I really have to say is TSA. Okay? I mean, right there. That's a perpetual violation of your Fourth Amendment right to be free from an unlawful search and seizure. There were other ways we could have done airport security. Israel is in the middle of a war zone. They profile behavior. They don't grope every grandmother and infant and attractive girl in the name of national security. It's a joke. It is a national embarrassment. You know why we haven't had a hijacking? We haven't had a hijacking since 9/11 because we have armed air marshals that might be on every flight, or they might not be. That's a brilliant deterrent effect. You do a little bit of PR, and you give somebody the right to conceal carry. Just think if every Californian had the right to conceal carry. We'd have a lot less crime in this state. But the interesting thing about my bill, and this is funny because when you're in the California legislature, they train you. What you're supposed to do is be super nice to everybody. And I am. I'm always polite to everybody. But I don't go become their buddy. I don't go drinking with them. I don't go partying with them and doing this and that. I might go to a function together just in the interest of getting along once in a blue moon. But you're supposed to develop these relationships so that you can then go lobby your bills. Well, I don't think most bills should pass. I don't think most bills should be put forth. I don't think we need any more laws. I think we need to repeal a whole lot of laws. We need to reinstate and reinforce protections against our government to protect our fundamental civil liberties. So I didn't lobby my bill. I didn't call a single member. The Republican Party came to me and said, we're not going to support your bill. I said, so? You guys are the super minority. It doesn't really bother me. If you don't understand this issue, let me give you an example. They had a commemoration day for the Japanese citizens that were interned here on California soil. That was a sad day in California history. And I gave a speech. I decided not to be super political. I said the way that we can honor the internees, and they were sitting up in the gallery looking down, is to make sure this never happens again. And therefore we should stand against the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, that was signed by President Barack Obama last year. And we should support a bipartisan effort to make sure it never happens on California soil. Before I could even get that out of my mouth, the gavel came down, and they're slamming down the gavel over and over and over again. So I waited. And eventually they lectured me and turned my microphone back on. Would you please speak to the merits of the bill? I said I was speaking to the merits of the bill. And I said the same thing all over again. And then my time ran out, and I got a standing ovation from those who were interned. Think about that. See, I don't care what the politicians think. I care what the people think. And that's just the right thing to do. And so, if you ask me if we're going to take a conventional pathway to victory, I will tell you there is no conventional pathway to victory. Let me give you an example. Is there any chance I could get a little water? I hate to pull a Rubio on you all. I figured that. I've learned to be comfortable in... Oh, wonderful. Thank you. One of my first speeches I gave, I was just so nervous that I just walked off the stage. My buddy was filming it. I was in front of my home crowd, and I was so nervous. And then it like dawned on me that as I bent over to get the water, that the top of my bald head was showing in the video. And somehow that relaxed me. But I just want you to go back in time a little ways with me, just for a moment. Do you remember the day that presidential candidate Mitt Romney made the comment about the 47%? Do you remember how you felt? I was like, hallelujah, praise the Lord. Somebody finally told the truth. His political consultants were horrified. So, you are a Republican candidate for president. The media hates you. They regularly demonize you for being a billionaire. So they demonize you for being successful at achieving the American dream. And you have what every single Republican candidate since the beginning of time has coveted. You have a rendezvous with destiny tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Right? There's going to be a microphone. There's going to be a press conference. There's going to be an apology, right? I just want you to picture, just for a moment, that I'm Mitt Romney. Okay? Hold on. Okay. Right. Come on, it's not that hard. I got hair. I'm a billionaire. I'm in the presidential election. All right, but now I'm Mitt Romney. I'm coming up to that microphone. This is what I would have done. I would have taken off my jacket, cast it aside. I would have rolled up my sleeves. And I would have said, while I was doing that, I just fired all my consultants. Because they wanted me to come out here and apologize for telling the truth. It breaks my heart. That 47% of Americans no longer believe in the American dream. Where did we go wrong? That people would rather be in dependence and bondage to a government program than have the pride that comes from working and providing for your family and achieving that success through blood, sweat, and tears. And you know, if you're in that 47%, I want your attention because I'm talking to you for a minute. You know why that bothered you so much? Because you know it's true. When you look in the mirror, you know you're capable of so much more. You won't even look yourself in the eye. And your kids, you want better for them, but you don't know how to teach them because they're copying you. And you're afraid that they're going to live the generational failure that you are. But I believe in you because this is America. You live in the greatest country on the face of the earth. People are fighting, climbing over each other, willing to die just to get here and breathe a little bit of free air. So I don't know what it's going to take to turn this around. But I'm asking every one of you out there that is concerned about this to join me in this effort. Whether you're a business owner, a teacher, a poet, a priest, or a politician. I need your help because I can't do this alone. But together, I think we can reinvigorate the American spirit. We can set this country on fire. We can become the most productive, most prosperous, freest country on the face of the earth. But we will never be able to do it if 47% of you are left behind. So I'm asking you to trust me with your vote because I care about you enough to tell you the truth. We'd have had a different president. Now, would he be any better? I don't know. But he wouldn't be as destructive as what we have right now. So when people ask me, what chance does a guy like you to have winning the governorship of California? I think I've got even odds. And the reason I do is because everywhere I go, people are hungry for the truth. And I don't have all the answers. But I know where to find them. Because I don't just give speeches. I listen. I talk to people. When I was running for office, my handlers, who didn't know anything about politics, but they were told, you're not supposed to spend more than 2 minutes at the front door. You're not going to get to enough houses. Well, I wasn't worried about getting to enough houses. As a matter of fact, I didn't even have a list because the Republican Party wasn't working with me. So I just walked up to front doors like a kid selling candy or something. Except I was selling freedom. And I talked to people. And it just so happened that I had a phone bank on this beautiful Saturday in May, exactly 1 month out from the election. And I am a very optimistic person. So there's, 30 people in this room or something like that. I expected when I said I'm going to have a phone bank that all 30 people would show up. Instead, we got 4. And with those 4, we began making phone calls. And something really resonated with the people about our message. And it was amazing. So I decided, okay, I'm going to go knock on doors. Oh, we accidentally called my opponent. He was sitting home in his easy chair. And the lady who called him was so agitated. And, I was taking volunteers and she's like, I can't believe I did that. And I said, that's brilliant. Because now he thinks either I have an army of volunteers or he thinks that I'm so arrogant that I'm right up in his face. Either way, it works well for me. It makes him very uncomfortable. So I thought, what better way to finish the day than do a precinct walk on his street? Oh. Yeah. His neighbors didn't like him very much. There wasn't a single yard sign when we got there. At least none of his. After knocking on 15 doors, 12 people answered, I put up 10 yard signs. Wow. My message, by the way, was very simple. We had boiled it down to one sentence. I will bring the Arizona law to California. I did not deviate from that message when I went to a Hispanic house, which was a little scary because you're told that people who are Hispanic love illegal immigration. I never thought that was true. I don't believe in treating people anything other than talking to them as Americans. So I told this lady, I said, I believe in legal immigration, but I do not believe we should reward illegal immigration, and I will bring the Arizona law here to California. She grabbed the yard sign, almost gave me a hug, and stuck it in her yard. Now, as the former leader of the largest Minuteman group in the state of California, that warmed my heart because it told me that it doesn't matter what the color of your skin is or where you come from. People understand that a nation that is ruled by laws is the only nation in which you can live free. Because if all of us are equal under the law, from the president down to a street sweeper, see, that's a beautiful thing. That's an empowering thing. I had Democrats putting up yard signs. By the time I was done, I had run out of yard signs. I went on to the next street. I had no more literature. I was just going to talk to this group I saw standing there. I mean, I had a couple business cards in my pocket, but I had no visible evidence of who I was. And there were 3 people on the front lawn talking, and the lady turned to me, she said, "You're Tim Donnelly." I said, "What?" She said, "Yeah, I read about you. You were on the front page of our paper last week when you said you would bring the Arizona law, and all the other candidates said, ooh, maybe, ooh, I don't know, let me get back to you. People are rioting in the streets over this." Well, I read the Arizona law. All it does is enforce federal immigration law on the state level and empower the state to basically control its own destiny. I didn't think that was too harsh. It did have people going out with Gestapo tactics demanding your papers. I would never support anything like that. I don't want the cops in my face any more than I want them in anybody else's. But I was shocked. But it really gave me a glimpse. And the glimpse that it gave me was if you take strong positions and if you articulate what is in people's hearts, they will follow you to the ends of the earth. They will spread the message virally. And they're looking for something like that. They're looking for something like that that is not attached to a brand they hate. So the fact that right now the Republican Party is viciously attacking me and dismissing me is going to backfire on them. And somewhere along the line, our campaign is going to come out of nowhere. And we're going to begin to emerge. And we will have the strongest grassroots network that has ever been seen in a statewide campaign in the state of California. And I intend to unite the Republican Party, the Libertarians, liberal Democrats, conservative Democrats, anybody and everybody who is sick and tired of what's going on under one banner. It's real simple. This is not Tim Donnelly's campaign. This is our campaign. Because I can't do this by myself. I can't do this alone. I need your help. You know, at this point in a speech, which are usually not videotaped, I'm going to put my microphone back on and make it easier for Paul. At this point in the speech, a politician would pull out an envelope like this and say, "I need you to donate to my campaign." I'm not going to try to improve upon that model because it works. So one of the ways that you can help is to financially support me, but it's not the only way. It's important. And I tell people, if you can write that check for $27,200, please do it, but make sure you put that comma in there. If all you can give me is $1, I want it. And I'll tell you why. You ever buy a lottery ticket? We all want to win, right? So we pay attention. And we do whatever we can to help it. If you make an investment, whether it's $1, $5, $10, $100, whatever you're able to do, it's critically important because I want this to be your contact card. I want your information on here. I want to be connected to you because the more people we gather over the next year, that is the key to victory. Because something happened on my campaign for the assembly. There was a day when I became intensely frustrated. Because as a candidate, you spend so much time asking people for money. And you never get the money when you need it. And I was so frustrated because I knew I could win. And then something hit me. You don't win the election by how much you raise. You win the election by how many votes you win. So that may sound very, very, very simplistic. But what that meant was that I worked relentlessly in the time that I had to gain as many votes, to find people who had spheres of influence, to use social media, to go to churches where they would let me give my testimony, and then I stood in the back and met people. 2 days before the election, I met 600 people in a church. I went to buy radio ads and ran into the co-host of the most popular radio station in all of California. I had been buying ads on their station. I bought 4 ads for the whole campaign because they were $400 a piece for 30 seconds of airtime. But when I ran into this guy, he says, "I recognize you." I said, "How? What do you mean you recognize me? What are you talking about?" We had put 3 banners on the back of cars with my picture on them. And my message, patriot, not politician. So that got me, and he said, "You know what? I'm going to give you a plug on air today." Because I told him, I said, "We're beating the establishment. I don't know how, I don't know why, I just feel it." And so he said, "I'm going to give you a plug on air." So I called my friend and I said, "You need to get your digital recording equipment. Record the next hour of his program." And I went to a print shop where we were taking all of our little tiny mail cards, little tiny postcards. We had been handing them out in person. We'd given out about 2,000 of them. We got all of our volunteers to bring them to a central location, and we're organizing them, putting them into a box, lining them all up so that they can be automatically printed and mailed out for election day voters. And we're listening, and this guy comes on air. And he says, "Hey, you won't believe this. I ran into a candidate in the parking structure." It wasn't the parking structure. It was the bathroom. But he didn't want to say that on air. And he gave my entire message. He gave me a 2-minute ad because his partner kept arguing with him. "Oh, you don't want to endorse a candidate. Oh, don't. Because then everybody's going to come out of the woodwork and ask me to..." And they're bantering. And every time he's saying my name and I'm hearing cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. This happened 6 days before the election. So we recorded that, stuck it up on our website. My trucks were driving up and down the freeway. People were honking, giving a thumbs up. Now, why did that happen? It happened because I believed. It happened because sometimes when you're out there working really hard, amazing things can happen. And the night before the election, I hit 60 houses. There was a man walking his dog. The dog was doing its business, and I got his vote. The man's, not the dog.
You picked up the dog's business, huh?
I wound up running into a mayor of a town who knew the father of my biggest opponent. He didn't like him. I won that guy's vote. He said, "I'm going to call 25 or 30 of my friends tonight and win you those additional votes." On election night, I won by 40 votes. And then when they finally counted them all, it was exactly 1 vote per precinct. I think we can do that. I think we can win back our state. I don't think there's any other way that we can win. Not in 2014. Not with the candidates who are out there. Not with the condition and the direction of the parties. I think we have an incredible opportunity. And I would ask you to join me in that endeavor. God bless you and Godspeed.
We do have a few questions for you.
Fire away.
Some of them you've already answered. Businesses are leaving California. I think you've dealt with that one pretty well. Do you think we should have work permits for guest workers?
Let me go back to your first question just for a second, because I think there is something significant that needs to be said. A lot of people think you can't control, if you just win the governorship, how are you going to change all these laws and regulations? Well, right now we have regulations without representation. We have all these boards and commissions. There was a fellow sitting at that table right there who came in earlier and talked about a board, happened to be the automotive board, and all these arbitrary regulations they passed down. They might have banned fully automatic weapons in this state, but the state has fully automatic weapons to regulate us, and they use them liberally. The governor appoints 3,000 people to populate the boards and commissions that drive policy, that drive regulation. So the governorship is the most significant way to immediately do a U-turn in the business climate. If you take the California Air Resources Board, which is one of the favorite boards of the environmentalists, that board right there has 12 members, and it has 11 members and a chairman. 5 of them have to come from the local air board, so you're going to get environmentalists right there. But 6 of them could be from the industries that are regulated, and that means if you're in construction or if you're in heavy equipment operation, trucking, mining, all these industries, cement making, all these industries that the California Air Resources Board has driven out of the state, they're now using the cap and trade to literally confiscate millions upon millions of dollars from business owners. And if you wonder what they're doing with that money, a lot of you may know, you've heard of Agenda 21, they're taking that money and they are buying up rural farmland and rural areas, and they're turning them into state public land. And then they're selling off the water rights to the cities because that's where they want people to live. And they have become more and more blatant about it. They're admitting it in public now. They never used to admit it. They just kind of kept it hidden. They want to drive people out of farming. Well, at some point, where are we going to get our food if we allow them to continue down this road? And they've made it so painful. CARB is another board that is going after the tractors and all the equipment on a farm. And all of their solutions are so destructive to the spirit of what they're trying to solve. Sometimes it's not even a real problem. That if we were able to take that over and reverse it, and then I would like to see those boards rescind regulations, because they could do that. They could do it with a vote of the board. They don't have to go all the way back through that building and all of those politicians who have been bought off by all the special interests. So that right there gives you a real indication that we could do a lot with the business climate. Now to your second question.
Guest worker permits.
I believe that we need to take the entire immigration debate and we need to break it down into 3 components. Right now, they're trying to jam through one of the worst bills I've seen since the health care bill. And this bill is so bad that you basically have to pass it until you can know what's in it. Jim DeMint, who is a very strong defender of freedom, he happens to be a Republican, but he is a patriot. He has said that this bill could potentially cost us trillions of dollars. And that is not the kind of mistake I think we should be making. Part of what they're doing is they use the guest worker idea to drive the debate. They use the children to drive the debate. I say we take back control of the debate. Border security is a serious issue. It should stand alone. As a leader of the Minutemen in California, I have been on the border. I have seen the drug cartels up close. I have seen the corruption where police officers are actually loading drugs over the border in full uniform with camo suits and ghillie suits and M4s. This was a Mexican police force, was actually part of the drug cartel. I saw this with my own eyes. If they had seen me, I wouldn't be here talking to you. So women are routinely raped as a way to control them. You have two types of trafficking. You have labor trafficking, where they sell people into the fields as indentured servants, and then you have sex trafficking, where they promise little 12, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old girls. They tell the parents, hey, your kid is going to come work in America and have a better life. They're going to work in a hotel or a restaurant. They don't tell them they're going to rape that little girl 40 times the first night and then sell her on the streets. But that's what's happening right here in California. That's happening in Sacramento. That's happening in LA. That's called human trafficking. I don't think we should do the wrong thing and not deal with that issue because some people want cheap labor. So, as there is a border security component that we must address, and if we don't, we will have blood on our hands. Because when I first came to office, there were 35,000 people who had been killed in the drug cartel war. Now they've lost count. They estimate it's between 70 and 100,000 in the last 5 years. That's our closest neighbor. That's our biggest trading partner. We don't go to their defense. There's something horribly wrong here. And in large part, we ignore it because of the cheap labor. The second component is labor. We do need a guest worker program. We do not need a guest worker program in every single solitary industry. And I think there needs to be a very careful discussion with the stakeholders, who are the people. Because one group they leave out of every discussion are the citizens and the taxpayers. I don't want to have a guest worker program in construction, because construction has always been a fallback job for an awful lot of Americans. We have 3 million Californians out of work. So I will not back something that would allow people to come over here and take the place of somebody on a construction site. In agriculture, where people have indicated very little willingness to work, I would be much more amenable. But I would also say that if you're going to have something, if you're going to do it, you need to make sure that there's some reward for the taxpayer. So you say to the individuals, fine, you want to come here, you want to work, you want to have a better life, we're all for it. So we're going to do it legally, it's going to be controlled. That means you're probably going to have some kind of permit. You will come here and your employer will be responsible for you. You will not become a public charge. That means you don't get to collect any welfare. If you need to go to the hospital, that is up to your boss. Period. And you're going to be here for a period of time and then you're going to go home. You do not get to bring your family here. Because when you bring your family here, and we have a welfare state, and we do, we have 1/3 of the welfare recipients in the country, we have less than 13% of the population of the United States. We are way too generous. We have an entire industry. And I think we need to go after the fraud in the welfare, because you know what? There are people in need. And the people who are committing fraud are stealing, not just from you and I, they're stealing from the people who really need help. So, I don't have every answer to that, but I think that's something that could definitely be worked out. But once again, we need to bring the people to the table and make sure that they are respected, and make sure that we don't allow people to become a public charge, and we put the onus on the employers who want to employ people who are not legally here.
The gay marriage issue. The people voted, but it seems like it wasn't what the people who were in control wanted to hear.
Well, let me finish on the last topic, because I forgot to get to the third point. The third component of the immigration debate, the third aspect, is the one that they always lead with, and that's citizenship. And we should say to people, look, if you are here in this country illegally, I want you to make the choice. Instead of, they always throw it on us. I want to throw it back. I want you to make the choice. Did you come here to work and send money home? Or do you want to become a U.S. citizen? Do you really want to become an American? And when they make that decision, if they say, and come back to the table and say, I want to be an American, then I say what we need to do is we really need to reform the immigration process. And immigration is always legal. There is no illegal immigration. Okay, there's illegal entry into our country. But we have a policy right now that invites people to come in and earn a PhD at one of our universities, and then we kick them out. So they go create jobs and innovate in another country. I think that's insane. We need to fix that. We have policies that are so restrictive that if you lose your job, you can be deported. If you make one mistake, you can be deported. I think we need to streamline and fix that policy, but we need to have it serve three needs. The first one is the national interest of the United States. The second one is the economic interest of the United States and our state. And the third component would be family reunification for the individual who's coming here. Right now, as of 1965, our entire immigration policy is driven by family reunification. There is no place at the table for any of the American interests. And I think that's a mistake. But then I would say to those who say to me, I still want to become an American. And I would say, we want you here. So we're going to make the process easier, but we're only going to have one process. Because the minute that you set up a separate process, you undermine the rule of law that is the cornerstone of a republic. And when you do that, you essentially turn this country into the country that they're fleeing. And I think that is a massive mistake. But what I would say to them is not only am I willing to streamline that and support you, but I am willing to sponsor you if you say that you're willing to do whatever it takes to become an American. And I think that would strengthen our country. It would solve a thorny problem that has plagued us for decades. And it does it by respecting the principles that made this country great and upholds that which we say we want, which is we want less illegal immigration. Then let's stop rewarding it.
If we could cut it to about 3 minutes to each.
Okay. I will give you the answer on gay marriage in less than a minute. I believe that marriage is between one man and one woman. It is a sacred covenant. It is ordained by God, and it belongs in the church. I don't think the government ought to have anything to do with it. Period. And if you study history, the reason the government got involved in marriage is because they didn't want people of different races to get married. So they would have kept me from marrying my wife. And I would never support that kind of a policy. When I told that answer to one of the reporters at the Sacramento Bee, I knew it was a good answer when I saw how angry he got. Because they asked Republicans these questions to trap them. And so he turned on a tape recorder. He said, say it all over again. And then he said, well, what about tax credits? I said, well, are we talking about marriage or are we talking about taxes? And I said, because I want lower taxes. I'm for a lower, flatter tax that spreads out the tax base. And he goes, no. What about hospital visitation? And I said, well, come on. All of us know that the best medicine for somebody in the hospital is a visitor that they want to see. So if an individual wants to see that person, I don't think the government should be involved in that decision, period. And he said, well, some of the families, I said, well, that's a family decision. Do you want to involve the government in a family's decision? See, you really want a government to intrude in people's lives. And he didn't know what to say. Then he went on to abortion. He goes, fine. What do you think of abortion? So I pulled out my family picture and I threw it on the table. I said, I'm one of 14 kids. Where do you think I stand on that issue? And that's when he turned off the microphone.
The fair tax.
I believe we should have a fair, flat tax. Ultimately, if I was in control of the universe, I would only tax consumption. I would not tax work. Period. But the problem is, if you do that on a state level, and if you do it too drastically, what happens is people flee and they go buy the goods and services in the neighboring state. I think there's a simple way that it could be crafted, and it could be very, very successful. And every time in history that taxes have been lowered and taxes have been made more fair, and I think I loved what Dr. Benjamin Carson said. He had it real simple. He said, if a person makes $1,000 and they pay $100 in taxes, that's fair to that person. If a person makes $10 billion and they pay $1 billion in taxes, why do you want to punish them? And I think that's really the question we have to ask our government. Why do you want to punish us for being successful? I want everybody in this room to be a millionaire. No, I want you guys to be billionaires. Okay, don't get excited.
Keep going.
Well, then once you become a billionaire, I want you to contribute. Here's the envelope. It's $27,200. All right.
Common Core versus homeschooling.
Well, the Common Core I've just started to study. As a matter of fact, I have to give a speech on it, and I don't know a whole lot of what's in it. But I do know that it is government dictated and that it deviates from the actual core principles and our history. And from that point of view of what I've heard of it, I would absolutely oppose it because it goes right along the lines of everything else they're doing. They're dumbing people down. The entire public school system was set up by a fellow named Dewey who said if we can just brainwash them into accepting our socialist programs, then and now we are seeing it play out. And you know what? You know what's funny? People don't want to be controlled. Think about it. All right? You don't want to be controlled by your spouse. You don't want to be controlled by your parents. You certainly don't want to be controlled by your kids, but you know, it's funny how they have that way of, oh, Dad, you know, we don't want to be controlled. We want to be in control of our own destiny. And this whole idea, every bit of this whole discussion, going all the way back to the foundings of this country, are about who's going to control your destiny. Are you going to live free? Or are you going to be in servitude to a government that is dictating your every choice to where you have no choice?
Have you heard of iCaucus?
Yes. They were the first people who endorsed me.
Really?
Yes. They were the only people who endorsed me, by the way. Yes, and I know about Jason Chaffetz, who slept on the floor in his congressional office and still does and fights the good fight. And I believe in their model, which is they hold people accountable. They do interviews and then they vote on them. It's very democratic, but it's also an accountability tool.
Good. So I'd like to open it. Brian.
Yes.
So the Republican establishment in California angled against you. The Republican brand is certainly a tarnished brand in California, if not in the rest of the United States. What's the benefit of you maintaining your affiliation with the Republican Party versus joining a Libertarian Party or even a declined to state party?
Well, right now, the Republican Party represents 27% of the electorate. I don't know what the numbers are for the Libertarian Party, but I know that there is a semblance of an infrastructure. I also know that my existence as a candidate has created a great deal of consternation. And so I went to an event 2 days ago, and I talked to the Republicans, and I knew half the room was against me. Half the room was establishment, and they've been bought off by all the billionaires. And I said, we need to fight for the soul of this party. and what this party used to stand for. And if I stand in there and do that, and if we are able to bring it back together in some semblance of a working party where it has a get out the vote effort, where it has precinct operations, they will work for me. And that's a good start. But you have to go beyond that. And I think the principles and the way that I talk about things and the fact that I'm not owned by anybody, and if anybody wondered where I stood, let me just tell you what happened in my reelection. It's real simple. The Republican establishment greenlighted $425,000 to be spent to support a rhino to take me out of office because of Prop 14. The SEIU founded an entire PAC just to spend against one candidate, and that was me. And they spent $500,000. So I had $925,000 spent against me, and I spent $14,000 on one mail piece. But I had sent hundreds of messages to the public through the television airwaves, the radio waves, and the newspapers. And I got 60% of the vote in a 40% Republican district. And I annihilated them. So I don't believe that you can win right now without a strong infrastructure of a ground game or a tremendous amount of money. We aren't going to have a tremendous amount of money. But we won't have a ground game at all if I can't pull together the Republican Party, the Tea Party, and anybody else, including all willing libertarians and anybody else that cares about what's happening in our state. But there's a lot of people that we'll never reach. And since it is a top two, we know one of them is going to be a Democrat. That's absolutely unequivocally true, right? If I am the other candidate, then all the brain-numb zombies who just vote party will vote for me. And that equals victory. Because if we are not victorious, we can affect no change. Yes.
Do you feel that fracking is an environmentally safe procedure? Has it been researched enough, and would you allow it in California?
Fracking has been done in states all over this country. There have been a few problems with it. They've worked most of them out. I think it is ridiculous to not tap the oil reserves we have here in the state of California. That would make us one of the most prosperous states in the union instead of one that is perennially broke and dependent on foreign oil and essentially arming the people who wish to destroy us.
If you run for governor, your affiliation with the Minutemen will be a potential Achilles heel for your race. Good, bad, or indifferent with that. Essentially, people will go, oh, that's the guy with the Minutemen. And people who don't want to think further than that will just leave it at that. What's your plan to mitigate that issue?
Well, see, I don't buy into everything you said. I believe that the media will bring up the fact that I was the leader of the Minutemen. And everywhere I have gone, people in the strangest places. I was in the Jonathan Club of all places. That is like the toniest, most sophisticated old boys club. They were actually celebrating the fact that I stood up and took that stance and thanking me. And these are people that can write really big, fat checks. Out with ordinary people, they get it. They understand this is a massive problem. You don't have to explain it to most of them. So once again, I win. I'll give you a quick example about the gun at the airport, because I think it goes along the same lines. There was a lady traveling through TSA, and she saw my bag, and it had the assembly seal, and she said, "Are you a California politician?" I said, "No. I'm an elected representative of the people." And she said, I said, "Why? Do you have complaints?" She said, "You got 4 hours?" And we wound up talking, while you're getting dressed again. she says, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm Tim Donnelly." And she didn't know who I was from Adam. So I gave her my card, and it has a picture of me. It says Patriot, not Politician. She goes, "Oh, I like that. That's great. Yeah." And then, I mean, she was the poster child for a soccer mom. And she just gave me her litany of complaints. The first thing she mentioned, not knowing anything about me, was illegal immigration. She started talking about the DREAM Act. I said, "I tried to recall the DREAM Act." She goes, "So what? You failed." I go, "Wow. I took 3 months of my life while everybody else was off golfing and going to Hawaii, and I'm out there trying to do that. I'm getting death threats. Thanks a lot." Then she's telling me about unions and the school and how they cut the programs because the union janitor needs to work 3 days a week and have this great retirement. She went on and on about that. And I said, "Okay." She says, "Who are you again?" And I said, I'm not getting through this, lady. So I pointed to the TSA and I said, "I'm the assemblyman who brought his 45 through there." She goes, "Oh my God, I love you." What that story tells me is that people hate politicians. They hate being lied to. They hate somebody telling them they're a racist because they're concerned about something that consumes $22 billion of our budget. And when they hear a guy named Tim Donnelly cared enough to go to the border, they just want to know why. And I was on CNN the other day, and CNN said, "Ooh, how are you going to win the Latino vote? I mean, you're the Minuteman. What if they show pictures of you at the border?" I said, "You know what, I said, I'm not ashamed of what I did. I'll be proud if they show those pictures." Because you know what I was doing? I was defending and I was fighting tyranny in 2 countries. And ultimately, I believe that if we don't address the true problems and tell the truth about them and have somebody that is willing to take controversial positions, we're never going to have any chance at solving any of the problems. If you can't even say what it is, if you're afraid to use the term illegal alien because they've told you not to use it anymore, you've become part of the problem. If you're afraid to stand up and say that the Second Amendment is about defending freedom from tyranny, then you will never fight hard enough. Especially if you're afraid of being called a gun nut. Sure.
Oh, Tim, thanks. I appreciate your stance on embracing, what your detractors would try to tear you down with. I appreciate that greatly. And I would like to add to what you said that if anyone is curious about Tim's stand about immigration or race relations or anything like that, if all you have heard is what the mainstream media has said about him, then you need to go to calwatchdog.org and you need to read Katie Grimes' article defending you against Dan Moraine's really bad, poorly written, poorly reasoned article. The defense is out there. The rationale, the perfectly sensible rationale is there. It's online. It's available for you to read. calwatchdog.org, Katie Grimes.
And let me make one quick point. Since we are talking about trying to elect a governor, we always need to study history. And the last time we elected a Republican governor, I won't call him a conservative governor, was in 1994. And you know what was on the ballot in 1994? Proposition 187. 70% of Californians in 1994 thought illegal immigration was such a massive problem they wanted to cut off all funding for it. And then the courts threw it out. They never even adjudicated it. If you thought this was a problem in 1994, and now the problem is multiplied many, many thousands of times over, I don't think the vast majority of Californians have changed their opinions that much. And I think that, and I know just from my own experience from having received letters and from having done my own internal polling, I know that there's an awful lot of Democrats that will vote on that one single issue when it comes to the governorship, because they want somebody who is as skeptical of government as they are, and somebody who will defend their interests. And so it's actually, once again, the whole point of being as controversial as I am. That's why I get on Fox News. That's why I get on the, what was that show? The Daily Show. How many politicians have been on the Daily Show and the Colbert Report before I was ever even in elected office? So I'm able to get an audience based on the issues I have taken a stand for. Once I get there, I can deliver the message that is truly in my heart, not what they're trying to demonize me with. Yes.
Does anyone in the California legislature currently understand how Obamacare will really affect Californians? Is that exchange, the insurance exchange, actually being established? Can you explain to us, to your knowledge, how Obamacare will affect Californians?
Let me think of a really good example. Okay, there's a hurricane offshore, and the hurricane is heading for California. It's happened before. And the government of California gets out bulldozers. And instead of building berms in front of your house, they just destroy your house. That's how I see California's response to Obamacare.
That it could actually sink the economy of California, or because of the welfare?
We need, no, because of every aspect of it. They have taken away every single, even the incentives that Obama left in place. And that guy, by the way, when we talk about people electing moderates or whatever, we elect extremists in this country. Barack Obama is one of the most extreme presidents we have ever had. But even he thought we should have a little bit of market forces in place. So if you smoked, you paid more because you know what you're doing to your health and you're going to pay for it. It's just, that's called freedom. You make a decision, but there's some responsibility attached to it. And we allow the free market to set that price. California has decided there will be no price. And the same thing with obesity. So you have taken out all of the incentives and market forces, and you have replaced them with pure socialism. And most of the business owners I talk to, they don't understand how to implement it. They don't understand how California is going to implement it. It is a disaster, and if I were the governor, I would reverse it, and I would completely nullify Obamacare in the state of California. In the back.
My question is to prison reform, because I work at a prison and I see money being spent that is just, I mean, we have 33 prisons in the state of California, and some of them are in the state of closing, and I just see that giant money pit that they're not doing anything about. Our prison's educational system was still alive while the educational system on the street was getting cutbacks, and teachers were cut, programs were cut, but the prison system's education system didn't take a hit.
That is one of the hugest money pits, as you put it, and whenever you go there, you find a hotbed of controversy. But the simple numbers are very, I mean, the issue boils down to whether or not you want to have the government involved in every aspect of it, or whether you believe you can outsource some of it, whether you believe you can reform and not send everybody to prison. So there's a whole lot of issues related to it. In Texas, 2 years ago, they had exactly the same number of prisoners as we had in California incarcerated at the state level. It was 170. Texas does it for 2.7 billion. We do it for 10. So those are the hard numbers. We have allowed lawyers to run amok fighting, and now they have platinum-plated health care. They have better health care than you and I could ever hope to afford. And to me, that's ridiculous. We're spending $55,000 per inmate per year here. And so the very first thing that I would do is I would identify every single prisoner who is an illegal alien, and I would contract with a private prison in their home country. Most of them come from Mexico. And I would send them to that prison, and I would do it, I would negotiate a deal for $10,000 per year per prisoner, and I would allow them to serve their sentences there, because then I don't have to provide probation, I don't have to provide aftercare, I don't have to do all these other things that are now mandated by lawyers who have essentially dictated every aspect. If you have somebody who's sick in prison and needs a certain type of care, you know how ridiculous it is. I know there's two of you here that work in a prison. We spend all these resources to drive this individual for hours with multiple vehicles, multiple personnel who sometimes work overtime. And if you guys had something else to drink, it wouldn't bother me. And ultimately, we are just burning cash. We had so many different groups in the prison that are unionized, including doctors, to where we had a doctor getting paid $883,000 a year, and he wasn't even treating anyone. He was a psychiatrist. I mean, so the reality is you have to have somebody come in from the outside. And look, being a guard in a prison is an incredibly tough job. We need to respect that. And we need to take care of those guys. But at the same time, we can't allow all of these things to be so out of control that we're paying top dollar, and we're essentially taking $7 billion, I believe, out of our economy that is non-productive. So the pathway to the Texas model is that we do the public-private partnership. I would like to have a private organization run the prison and bring some California prison guards to there, which we had, but the governor shut all those down. I have a couple of those in my district in Adelanto. The state side of it was $15,000 per prisoner. Well, we don't need to have these massive state-run facilities for every Tier 1 and Tier 2 prisoner. So we could have removed all the Tier 1s and Tier 2s, put them into public-private partnerships like that, and then only have the state be involved in the most serious and gravest ones. And at the same time, we would still keep prison guards employed, and so we're protecting their jobs. We're not throwing them out of state, but we're operating the back end of the prison much more efficiently. And I'll tell you what, those corporations are not going to put up with the lawsuits the way the state of California has. So that is ultimately what I would do. The other thing I would look very hard at is medical paroles. And I would only look at medical paroles for those who pose no danger, but who are costing us millions upon millions upon millions of dollars that, once again, we shouldn't be spending. And, anyway, I did a radio program on that today. Yes.
This is the last question.
Oh, good. I get the last one. All right. My husband and I are on the interview panel for iCaucus, and so I'm very familiar with their procedures. And when we first joined up with them, we were also Tea Partiers and staunch Tea Partiers, because I was born in Boston, so it's kind of in the blood, you know. Anyway, one of the things I liked the most about iCaucus was they went nationwide with all of their money bombs, etc. I am already getting emails on candidates that are running in other states asking for support in one way or another. Now, I can't afford to financially support them all, but I am on every single state's email list for Tea Parties, and so what I do is I just viralize it when I get it and make sure that everybody sees it. And I think the advantage there is that Obama really has, in all his divisiveness, unified a big portion of this country, because I don't think there's probably many more people that want him out of there and want the government to change now. So I was wondering if you were going to take advantage of that as far as nationwide, or are you solely dedicated to California's agenda?
That's a great question. I'm nationalizing my race. It's the only way to raise enough money. I have met with 3 times with some of the biggest, heaviest donors to the entire, what I will just call the right-wing conspiracy, just for a little humor. And I've had several of them commit to my race. I also believe in what you're saying. There's a lot of people across this country that if they get an email, especially if it's an attractive email with a little video or something in it, they realize what happens in California will spread across the country. So they have a stake. And I think small donors, 5, 10, 20, what was I asking you for before? 27,200. Small donors are how I got here. Small donors, I think, can win elections in a big way. Well, thank you so much for inviting me here this evening.
Another successful evening, Mr. Kent.
We do have another question.
Oh.
My question regarding your current role as Assembly member. Currently, Assembly members represent 500,000 people in California, and state senators represent 1 million people. About that. Can you effectively represent 500,000 people, and would the state of California and citizens of California benefit from having more Assembly members in more states?
Yes, absolutely. You can't represent that many people very effectively, and it would, if we had representation that was much closer to the people, meaning much larger numbers, like they do in other states. I forget the state, if it's Vermont or Connecticut. One of the states back east has 400 representatives at the state level? New Hampshire. Okay. I knew it was somewhere in New England. So absolutely. But the problem is, in order to change the rules, you have to go through the people who currently control everything. But I would favor something like that, because I don't like seeing so much power concentrated. And you know what's funny about that? Because there's such a high concentration of power, when you first get to Sacramento, they're like, "Sir, can I help you, sir?" Oh, you're treated like royalty, until you show your true colors. As long as they think you're for sale and you're willing to dance the dance, it's unbelievable the lengths they will go to persuade you. And I never really understood it. And now I do when I see how few people are making these decisions. So absolutely. Thank you.